study, all right, today, and we're going to just go down a couple rabbit trails relating to the wise men. I had one of our boys in church talk. We preached the other week on the star. You remember that? We mentioned that, some of the supernatural events talk concerning the birth of Christ, and one of the fellows had a question about the star. And how it moved and how they saw it and all those kind of things. I don't know. All I know is what the Bible says. That's what it says. But we are going to talk about the wise men, and there is some debate about where. So when you read this, there's going to be some natural questions that you have. All right. One of them, it says they came from the east. Well, what does that mean? Well, we know what east is, and we're going to look at the map here in a minute. But so they came from the east, so we know that. But where actually is that? We don't all know, but I have a suspicion. All right, and so I'm going to give you the evidence that I have to support that suspicion. This is one of these little rabbit trails, okay, that I went down this week, and so as we do that, just pay attention, and then so where they're from, the gifts they were bringing. And how they even knew. How do you think these wise men knew about a star? How do you think they knew about that? Is it just one day, they're studying astronomy and all of a sudden they see another star? I think it's more to it than that. And I think they had to be looking for it, because if just a star, a new star appeared, how would they know, oh, we got to go to Bethlehem? How would they know that? And so there's all sorts of questions here. And I want to try to run down some of those, okay? We'll run down some of that. And so let's begin reading in Matthew chapter 2, and just kind of pay attention to these details as we go through. And now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem. Now, there's another word that is used in this place. I don't know what translation you have, but even in the title of my paragraph title there, it uses the word magi. Have you heard that word before? The magi. All right, and anybody know what that is short for? Anybody? Who said that? All right, it is short for magician. All right, magi. But really, that's the word we use that word, but it really means like wise man, or they know secrets. All right, so in a magician. Now, and this is not the same as what we have today, a magician getting up on stage. And now we could say that magician has a knowledge that we don't have. He's performing a trick, and we don't know how he did it, but he knows how he did it. And so he has a extra knowledge about that particular trick or that particular thing. Well, these wise men, magi, and we could use the word, and I don't want to blur. I think let me get further into this, but nevertheless, let's just say wise men, magi, and then we'll get back to that in a minute. All right. Verse number 2, saying, "Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and are come to worship him." When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and the scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where Christ should be born. And they said unto him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet, And thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not thou the least among the princes of Judah, for out of thee shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had privately called the wise men, inquired of them diligently at what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, Go and search diligently for the young child. And when ye have found him, bring me word again that I may come and worship him also. When they had heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star, which they saw in the east, went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. And when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned of God in a dream that he should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way. Now, one other thing, and I think you probably know this, but just for the sake of being thorough, these wise men, this was not at the same time that the shepherds came. All right, this was not at the manger scene. This was, again, at a house. This was later on, and it is believed that it could have been almost at least 2 years from that point. That is why Herod decided to kill all the babies 2 years old and younger from this stage, all right, at this particular juncture. And so somewhere between birth and 2 years old is when these wise men came, all right? So, and again, they brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh. All right, so now, how did these men, and another thing is, we're not, a lot of times, I don't know, do we have these up here? Do we have wise men up here? Are they up here? Maybe not. Maybe. But, a lot of times you'll see a manger scene or a nativity scene, and you'll see like 3 wise men. You know what I'm talking about? Well, they say the 3 wise men because there's 3 gifts that were brought, but it's not necessarily 3 wise men. It could have been many wise men. It could have been several wise men. We're not told that, but so it is conjecture to say that it's 3. But usually they would travel in caravans or larger groups. One of them was for a safety factor. Anyway, and so all right. So now, how did they know that there was going to be a star? How did they know to come to Judea or to come to Bethlehem? How do they know these things? And so I want us to kind of get that in our mind. And now I want us to go to Daniel. All right, let's go to the book of Daniel. Now we'll go back to Matthew 2 in a minute, but in Daniel, there's a couple passages I want to look at, and we're going back in history, and this particular time in history was about 450 to 500 years. Babylon was in captivity for 490 years. The Jews were in captivity in Babylon for 490 years. All right, and so in that time, was the time when Babylon came and destroyed Jerusalem. They took over Israel. They did all of that, all right? As a matter of fact, they destroyed the temple. We're going to read some of this in just a minute. But they destroyed the temple, took the gold, took the silver, took all the valuables away from the temple, and completely destroyed it. Now, and then they took people in exile. In other words, they took the people, not the impoverished people. They took the upper crust people, the people that were learned, the people that were healthy, the people that were strong, the people that were very intelligent, the people that held high, prominent positions. They took all these people back to Babylon to be servants to the people of Babylon, the Babylonians. All right, and so when we get here, now, of those people that were taken into exile, you'll recognize some of these names. Daniel was one. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego was another. And one other thing that we're going to have to deal with studying this right here is that there were Israelite names that they had, and then there were Babylonian names that they had. All right, so Daniel's name was Daniel, and then he was given a Babylonian name, Belteshazzar. All right, that was his name given in Babylon. And the same with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That was their Babylonian name, whereas their Jewish name was Hananiah. Hold on. I can't pronounce it right now. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. There we go. Mishael and Azariah. I don't know if that pronunciation is right, but nevertheless, when they were taken into exile, the Babylonians, part of their Babylonian indoctrination was to change their names, change their food. You remember in the first part of Daniel where they tried to make them eat the king's food and make them eat certain things, and they said, no, we're not going to eat this. and they ended up being stronger than the rest of them that ate it. You know, so there was some early on, even in the exile, Daniel and his cohorts, there was something special about them, and God was giving them favor in this exile. So, but you remember the dream. Nebuchadnezzar was the king at that time. He's the one that destroyed Jerusalem, destroyed the temple. And now Nebuchadnezzar is king. He brings them back to Babylon, and Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. And he calls in all of his wise men, all of his soothsayers, all of his magicians, all these people that's supposed to be able to know deep things, you know, and he brings them all in, and they can't interpret the dream. They don't know. And as a matter of fact, they wanted, the king had a dream, it disturbed him, but he didn't even remember what the dream was. And so he wanted his wise men to tell him what the dream was and the interpretation of it. And he's like, how are we going to give you the interpretation of something we don't know, you know? So they went back and forth with that, and there was a big thing. And then Daniel's name came up because he was one that had, discernment. He was wise, he was studious, and God's favor was upon him. And they brought him in, and of course he gives the interpretation. He gives the dream, and he also gives the interpretation of it. But who does he give credit to? He doesn't, you know, gloat and take credit to himself. Nebuchadnezzar eventually says, look, there's no other God except your God. And so God was getting credit, and he was elevating Daniel in Babylon under exile. So now, having given you all that history there, let's go to Daniel chapter 2, and we'll skip down to verse number 46. And we're kind of picking up at the end of that story. It says, then the king Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and worshipped Daniel and commanded that they should offer an oblation and sweet odors unto him. And the king answered unto Daniel and said, of a truth it is that your God is a God of gods and a Lord of kings and a revealer of secrets, seeing thou couldest reveal this secret. Then the king made Daniel a great man and gave him many great gifts and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon. Hold on one second. We got a guy who is imprisoned, taken as a slave from Jerusalem, taken now, he's in Babylon. Who knows what he was doing at the time, being a cupbearer or whatnot, working in the king's household. Now God uses him, he creates a certain situation, and God uses him to elevate him within the Babylonian nation. So now we have a Jew who is now, he has made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon. And the chief of the governors, now look what it says, and over all the, what's that next word? He's over all the wise men of Babylon. Now that's interesting, isn't it? Then Daniel requested of the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon, but Daniel sat in the gate of the king. So Daniel now, he has the ear of the king. He's sitting there, but he's in charge of the province of Babylon. But who does he appoint to be over the wise men? Daniel's over the wise men, but now he's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are now over the wise men. So they're teaching, they're training, they're now a little bit of Babylonian culture. All right, is that look, they did have heathen gods, they served idols, they did all of those kind of things. They had sorceries, but they were very advanced for their age. I mean, they're known for some of the man-made wonders of the world, the Hanging Gardens. They're known for some of those things, some of those great feats. But they were very cultured. They studied astronomy. They studied all sorts of scientific things and putting together all this. So they were very studious, had libraries, all that sort of thing. But now we have a Jew Jews that were brought from captivity, that had been defeated, brought into Babylon, and now God used them to raise them up, to put them, and who are they over? They're over the wise men of Babylon. All right, so now let's go to chapter 4 of Daniel, verse number 9. That's chapter 3. Okay. Okay, let me back up to verse number 8. Let me back up. I'm going to go to verse 4. Let's just read this for context sake. All right, chapter 4, verse number 4. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in mine house and flourishing in my palace. I saw a dream which made me afraid, and the thoughts upon my bed and the visions of my head troubled me. Therefore made I decree to bring all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known unto me the interpretation of the dream. Then came in the magicians. Now, remember what is short for that. This is the English interpretation, magi. Do you see that? The magi, magicians. Now, this is not necessarily what we have on stage these days, but these are men that have understanding and it can go over into occult-type practices, but remember who's in charge now. Who's in charge of the magicians? Who's in charge of the wise men? Who's in charge of these sorcerers? Who's in charge of them now? Daniel is. So then came in the magicians, the astrologers. Now, isn't that interesting? Astrologer. What is astrology? It's really meaning behind constellations, star constellations and things like that. But you get into occult type things with that. And again, I'll throw this in while we're here. Like horoscopes and all those kind of things. Look, the Bible tells us you're supposed to stay away from that stuff. All right? You want to know God's will for your life? Read His Word. Follow Him. That's what it boils down to. All right, and He tells us to stay away from that, and it's basically witchcraft. All right, but they had astrologers. But what is that connected to? It's connected to stars, isn't it? All right, so okay. Then came in the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And I told the dream before them, but they did not make known unto me the interpretation thereof. But at the last, Daniel, here he comes to the rescue again. Daniel came in before me, whose name was Belteshazzar. Remember, they had given him, I told you, they had given him a Babylonian name. According to the name of my God, and in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And before him I told the dream, saying, O Belteshazzar, master of the magicians. All right. Does that mean that Daniel was this occult person? Is that what this is referring to? No, that's not what this is referring to. You get later on in the book of Daniel. Now look, God did use him as a prophet. God did use him to foresee things, but he was not involved in the occult. Now, I'm sure he had run-ins with some of the occultic things that was going on, but who was in charge? Who was the chief? Who was the ruler of the province of Babylon? Okay, I hope you've established that. Master of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in thee, and no secret troubleth thee. Tell me the vision of my dream that I have seen, and the interpretation thereof. And you can go on down, and he interprets that dream. But the point being here that I want you to understand is that who was in charge of the wise men, of the magicians, of the astrologers, of all of that in Babylon at this point? Who was in charge? Now, okay, so God brings a guy from Jerusalem, puts him in Babylon, in captivity, raises him up to oversee the wise men of Babylon. All right, you with me? All right, so this is where he's at. Now, what do you think? We've got a ladybug flying around. What do you think that Daniel was teaching the other wise men? Who was superior in his knowledge and his intellect and his ability to interpret dreams? Who was superior? Do you think they wanted to get in on this? Do you think they wanted to say, what do you think that he used to teach and to share his knowledge? What do you think? One tactic that we used when we were in Peru is language school. All right, and so we would have English classes. We would give English, because down there, the Peruvian people, they all wanted to, you know how we learn Spanish as a second language here, or French or whatever, but mainly Spanish. Well, down there, English is their second language. That's what they learn in school. And man, they study that, and they learn that, and they go into college, and they're taking English classes. But we offered English classes to help them, and we offered intermediate and basic and advanced. And I taught the advanced English class, and so we would have conversation, but guess what we use as our textbook to learn English? We use the Bible, all right, and that's what we would use. And so, now what do you think Daniel was using to teach and to share his superior discernment and the Spirit of God that was in him and on him? What do you think that he used to share with these wise men? All right, now I want to go and show you something. All right, let's go to Numbers, chapter 24. Numbers chapter 24, verse number, let's go to 17. This is actually Balaam and Balak, that story, and he makes a prophecy here, and this is a messianic prophecy. But Numbers 24, verse number 17. Well, let's back up to 16. He has said, which heard the words of God, and knew the knowledge of the Most High, which saw the vision of the Almighty, falling into a trance, but having his eyes open. He says, I shall see him, but not now. I shall behold him, but not nigh. Now look what it says. There shall come a star out of Jacob. Now, when he's saying Jacob, what is synonymous with that title, Jacob? Israel. What was Jacob's name changed to? It was changed to Israel. There will be a star out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. What is a scepter? A scepter is something that a king has that represents his authority and his power and his kingdom. All right, so who's going to rise out of Israel? Who's going to rise out of Israel? And he's going to have a scepter in his hand. There's other verses that refer to this. I didn't write them down. But who's going to do that? Who is it? Somebody say it out loud. Jesus is going to rise out of Israel and have that scepter. And it says, and shall smite the corners of Moab and destroy all the children of Sheth. And these are his enemies. All right. But the thing is, a star out of Jacob. Now, this is a reference that many believe that is a reference to a prophecy regarding Matthew chapter 2. When the wise men saw the star and they came from the east, remember? All right, we read that already in Matthew chapter 2. All right, so was Daniel a very studious person? I would say yes, because there were times that he was trying to understand things. You can go read the book of Daniel. And he would get down on his knees and say, God, I want to understand this. And it even says that, look, the angel even says, the minute that you set your heart to understand and to know, the minute you did that the message was being sent. God was sending an answer to you to give you the answer to your question. And so he was a very spiritual person, very, very intimate person with the Lord, and he was very studious, very diligent in studying the Word. So now, the wise men, we're going to tie some things together here. So I'm giving you this information. All right, so now it says back in Matthew chapter 2 that the wise men, where did they come from? It came from the east. Now, I want us to look at the map, all right? Can you see that little red dot? Can y'all see that? All right, you see right here where it says Judah? All right, and then Jerusalem is here, and Bethlehem is right around here somewhere. Now, let's go east. What is that? What is this? Would that be close enough to east? All right, now let me just say, that is 500 miles. This is the Arabian Desert here. And you see that little dotted line going around like this? That was the travel corridor. There was a couple of different ways right around here that they could have went. But that was a travel corridor that they would take, and they would go all the way around, and they would come down through here to get to Bethlehem. So it was a rather lengthy journey. Can you see that, Kevin? Yes. Okay. All right. And so, so if the wise men came from the east, what is east? Now look, Persia is also east, and there will be people that will argue that way over here. But then I think Babylon is east enough for us to call that east. Could we say that? I mean, with just what we've read, I think we could. So here's my interpretation of that. And I wouldn't fight somebody on that. We're connecting dots and we're chasing down rabbit trails. Okay, that's what we're doing tonight. So God allows Daniel to be taken from Jerusalem into captivity to Babylon. All right? God uses Daniel to interpret dreams for Nebuchadnezzar. He raises him up to be over the province of Babylon, over the wise men, over the magi, over all of that, over the province of Babylon. All right? What was he teaching them, or what was he sharing with them? I'm sure he was sharing Jewish culture, because once Nebuchadnezzar says, hey, there's no other God like your God, don't you think these wise men wanted to know more about that? And that opened the door and created an opportunity for him to be able to share some of the prophecies, some of the things that God was doing through Israel, some of their lineage, some of their heritage, what God was going to do in the future, all those things. Even in the book of Daniel, where was he looking? He was looking toward the future because of his prophecies. His prophecies are parallel with Revelation. And so he was looking for the future. And so what do you think he was teaching? What do you think he was sharing with these Babylonian wise men? And soothsayers and magicians and all that kind of stuff. I think he was sharing these prophecies, one that I shared with you about the star. So when you go back, if all that's true, and then you go back to Matthew and it says they came from the east, how would they know about a star? How would they know about it? It would be all the way back. I mean, because Daniel told them, hey, you need to be looking for this star. This is a prophecy that God gives in the book of Numbers, that look, there's going to be a king that's going to be coming, a scepter is going to rise out of Israel, and there's going to be a star that's going to accentuate that event. All right, so he's teaching that, and now the wise men come back, not come back, they leave that area. Now, and I know there's some battles. This is basically 500 years of history here. And Persia has also overthrown, but you remember even when Persia and Assyria and all of that, they overthrew Babylon, and let me think, Nehemiah. You remember Nehemiah was one that he was allowed to go back to rebuild Jerusalem. So all this happened during that time, but nevertheless. So they traveled. This is my take on it. I think they learned all this from Daniel. They learned all of it from Scripture, and they followed Daniel's instruction, went back to Jerusalem and then back to Bethlehem to worship the king because they knew the king was going to be born. You remember they had that discussion with Herod. Hey, there's going to be a king born in Bethlehem. And there's other prophecies that point to that as well, but I'm giving you some of the main ones, okay? Now, one other interesting thing that I want to throw in here, and let's go to 2 Kings chapter 24. Somebody's hungry. 2 Kings 24. Now, this is some of the history here of Babylon destroying Jerusalem. All right, back to 2 Kings chapter 24, verse number 13. This is, again, let me back up to 11. Chapter 24, verse number 11. And Nebuchadnezzar, now where have we heard that name before? That's all the way back in Daniel. And Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came against the city, and his servants did besiege it. And Jehoiachin, the king of Judah, went out to the king of Babylon, he and his mother and his servants and the princes and his officers, and the king of Babylon took him in the 8th year of his reign. And he carried out thence all the treasures of the house of the Lord. Now what is that talking about? What's the house of the Lord? What's that talking about? That's talking about the temple. And the treasures of the king's house, and cut in pieces all the vessels of gold which Solomon king of Israel had made in the temple of the Lord. So all that Solomon's temple and all of its grandeur was destroyed, and the gold was taken. as the Lord had said. Verse 14, and he carried away all Jerusalem, and all the princes, and all the mighty men of valor, even 10,000 captives, and all the craftsmen and smiths. None remained, save the poor sort of the people of the land. And I'll stop there, but you get the idea. So what did he bring from Jerusalem? And the key thing is he brought gold from Jerusalem, right? He brought gold from the temple. He brought gold from the king's house. All right, now I want us to go back to Daniel chapter 5. Now, don't get these names mixed up. Belshazzar was Nebuchadnezzar's heir. He took over after Nebuchadnezzar was off the scene. Belteshazzar is Daniel. All right, so they're very similar names, but don't get them mixed up. And let's start in verse number 1, chapter 5, verse number 1. Belshazzar the king made a great feast to thousands of his lords, and drank wine before the thousand. Belshazzar, whilst he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the gold and the silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem. Now, it's interesting. We saw where they took it out of the temple, right? And now here we are, years later, his predecessor, his successor is now, he's bringing some stuff out of storage. And what is that stuff he's bringing out of storage? Is the stuff from the temple, all right? The vessels from the temple. Commanded to bring the gold and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein. He was basically trying to defile it. Now you remember, Nebuchadnezzar, he was saying, hey, there's no God like your God, Daniel. But now Belshazzar, he had no respect, no reverence for the God of heaven at all. All right, and he was actually trying to defile the very things that were taken out of the temple. Verse 3, then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and the princes, his wives, and his concubines drank in them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver, of brass and of iron and of wood and of stone. By the way, this is like the day that Babylon fell. All right? So, but I want you to notice, so they took gold out of the temple. Now they're trying to defile that gold, and what happens and during that time is that they were overtaken, they were killed. I mean, they were overthrown. Babylon was overthrown in one night. All right, but the thing is, they had the golden vessels. They had that gold. All right, now let's go back in our mind's eye to Matthew chapter 2. What was the first gift that was mentioned that they brought? Is that not interesting to you? Hold on. Babylon takes something from the temple. It takes the gold from the temple. It stays in Babylon for a little while. Belshazzar. Now look, you remember Daniel's still on the scene. Matter of fact, he interprets the writing on the wall here for them. Daniel's still on the scene. What's he been teaching? He's been teaching Jewish culture. He's been teaching all about God. He's been talking about the power of God. Can you imagine him talking about crossing the Red Sea? He's talking about all those things, crossing the Jordan River. He's talking about the power of God. He's talking about all that. And now they're bringing that to defile in front of him and in front of people, to defile the golden vessels from the temple. And I just find it very interesting that 500 years from this point, well, not 500. I didn't look up the exact date on this, but hundreds of years. Let's just say that, because time has transpired. At least 70 years has transpired. And now time has transpired. And now those wise men, remember, what are they looking for? They're looking for a star, because they knew that prophecy. Daniel had taught them this stuff. I promise you, they had talked about the temple that had been destroyed. They talked about the sacrificial system. They talked about, they talked about all that stuff when they were talking to the wise men of Babylon. And now, Matthew chapter 2, what are the wise men bringing to lay at Jesus' feet? They're bringing gold. Is that not interesting to you? I mean, again, it does not say that this gold was the gold, that the temple was stolen from the temple. It doesn't say that. But I think God does have a sense of humor. And the sense of humor, he still owns it all. It doesn't matter how long you try to take it, he can get it back. You know, he can get it back. And now, and there's all sorts that we could go into what the gold was used for and all those kind of things. We could go that. But I just kind of wanted to get into that Babylon thing. So here's my take. Now, look, you could argue, oh, these wise men are from Persia. But I think I have laid out a pretty good argument. Just connecting dots in the Bible, that there's pretty strong evidence like that, saying that those wise men were from Babylon, and that Daniel, somewhere along the line, used his influence to teach them about the God of heaven, and to teach them about the prophecies and Jewish culture and the God of heaven. And that teaching withstood hundreds of years being passed down. You know, that's what wise men do. They don't lose their teaching. You understand? They keep passing it down. They keep learning from it. History repeats itself. You've heard this over and over. And they see this again and again. And so they were taught those things. And now that had been passed down, I think, from Daniel. All right? And Daniel used his influence and used his position of prominence to teach that stuff so that it lasted in such a way. He might have organized things in such a way. You know, I don't know if they had certain classes they taught, if they had it organized like that, and this was a required course, you know, for that to be considered a wise man. I don't know. But nevertheless, he used his influence, I think, to again influence the Babylonian people with the knowledge of God and what he was doing and the whole grand picture of what God's plan of redemption and God's plan for Israel and all of that. And he used that, and it was passed through the line so that the wise men, hundreds of years later, could come back and lay gold at Jesus' feet. Anyway. Okay, there you go. There's a study. There's a few little rabbit trails we went down tonight, and is that interesting? Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I'd not seen it that way before, and I had a couple things I was reading, and it just spurred my thoughts, and I got to digging into that a little bit more, and anyway, interesting. So I do think it's a pretty good argument that the wise men came from Babylon. Now, again, you could get into Persian culture and how, you know, the Persians overtook Babylon, and you can get into more of that history. But I think we've gotten to the root of it. You know, you understand what I'm saying? To the root of how those things came to pass. At least, pretty. It doesn't come out and say that, but I think if we all this circumstantial things that you put together, you can get a pretty good picture of that. I think so. Anyway, I'll give you something to chew on this week, right? I'll give you something to chew on and think about, all right, let's be dismissed in a word of prayer. Father, we love you, and again, are grateful for your word, and Lord, the things you teach us and the things that you help us to understand.